What are the rights of nature? What is a commensalistic relationship between the human and the non-human? How can we begin to rethink responsibility with property ownership to expand beyond our own anthropocentric view of improving the land to recognize what truly makes it Minnesota? Prairies, savannas, marshes, lakes, and the mighty Mississippi make up our beautiful state. How do we begin to reverse the monocultures we've created through lawns and cornfields to truly reflect the diversity of our homeland? Scientific and natural areas overseen by the DNR are a way for our government to set aside parcels of land for the sole purpose of protecting our Minnesota nature. Our project's goal is to expand these areas and to redefine how the property owners within the Sherburne Opportunity Area can take responsibility for fostering these native systems of ecology. Looking at the scale of the state, we see how many ecological subsections Minnesota is divided into, along with how small of an area the scientific and natural areas cover. Expanding this typology is the goal of the DNR and is outlined in their definition of opportunity areas. These OAs are created using Markson, a systematic conservation planning software that has created high priority zones within Minnesota that encircle rare features, including endangered animals and plant life. Looking at these zones and the natural and human systems that encompass them, we can begin to parse out the current conditions of each high priority area. Within the OAs across Minnesota, the main issues facing the conservation of these systems is agriculture, industry, and urban sprawl, which creates habitat fragmentation and pollution. Each of these ecological systems has been separated into small patches across vast distances. Rare features marked and highlighted for protection along with our native plant communities are still intact, require immediate protection. The first step goal in this project is to devote half of the area of the OAs to an SNA level of conservation. The goal of the SNAs is to leave nature untouched while providing education on native ecological systems. Bringing these systems to the backyards and parcel boundaries of property owners is a way to spread knowledge and responsibility for these ecologies while experimenting with habitat reintegration. The goal of our project is to first see what leverages we have to immediately protect the remaining natural areas, to connect the areas which have been protected, and begin to foster a new kind of relationship between the human and the non-human. Zooming into the zones that have been identified, we look into the specifics of the human and the non-human systems at play in each area. Sherburne County is mostly rural, with St. Cloud expanding from the west, along with most area being agricultural, dispersed residential, on what used to be native forest and prairie systems. These plant communities are still present in order of frequency are fire-dependent forest woodland systems, meadow carr systems, upland prairies, mesic hardwood forests, wet forests, forest-rich peatlands, forest floodplains, marshes, acid peatlands, and wetland prairie systems. The problem present in all of these zones are the amount of space taken over by monoculture, whether it's a crop field or a lawn, as well as the harsh divisions of the landscape created by the road system. Both are in stark contrast to the way nature systems flow in between and envelop one another. The fastest form of transportation in nature are waterway systems, which do the opposite of roads. Instead of dividing, they become systems of high diversity and habitat. To deploy the latter type of thinking to the entirety of the opportunity area, we'd like to implement 5 strategies to begin remediating these fractured landscapes. These strategies fall under 2 categories: protection and connection, setting aside land for nature and connecting nature to itself. First, to simply reassign all vacant lots to natural areas of habitat for habitat rehabilitation, paying close attention to those that overlap with the last of the natural vegetation. Second, to follow up on the DNR's campaign to place buffer strips along all ditches and agricultural areas. Right now, these perennial plantings are only meant to filter out nitrogen and phosphorus before they flow downstream to pollute our waterways. But with more extensive planning and gradually increasing area, we can begin to create wetland ecologies for rare species who are affected by the stripping of their habitat. To take on the property responsibility of native plant life, we are also assigning a community wildlife management area. At a neighborhood scale, you are required to denote 50% or more of the land area to native plant communities that could exist given specific site conditions. Since agriculture takes up most of the area on our OA, the move towards a holistic permaculture for the defined area, filling in unused land with native systems and species just as a community wildlife management area would, but also moving towards the growing of many species of food and livestock to create an inefficient landscape. This inefficiency is also present in our final strategy to cut habitat fragmentation, closing off of roads and shifting to a slow movement through the landscape in order to respect the animals migrating across it. To begin implementing these systems, we have created an experimental cohesive area typology, which seeks to connect current conservation areas to themselves, as well as set aside the vacant land for immediate reassignment to a monitored and rehabilitated landscape. This area sets aside approximately half of the opportunity area. It would be subject to the strategies that have been laid out. Due to climate change, we need to begin implementing these systems, but we also cannot be certain that these systems will return to what they once were. Creating a structured area, enforcing these strategies, and seeing how they play out over time, and to see if these ecologies, once present, have shifted to something new. All of these leverages, interventions, and assigned areas are in an effort to create a boundary object. Interventions that are plastic enough to adapt to local needs and constraints of the several parties employing them, yet robust enough to maintain common identity throughout the sites. Shown across the ECA areas and branching off to connect the rest of the opportunity areas to disparate wildlife management areas. At the human scale, this means living more closely with nature, taking responsibility for the native and plant and animal life of the land your property sits on, and validating the existence of the non-humans. Where scientific nature areas have site stewards, so too should all of these systems. The rights of nature are something that nature cannot fight for. They are something we need to take responsibility for.